This video is on the Viewable Files section of the administrative widget. It's a critically important tab to understand if you're going to have a well-running system. So let's just hop straight in and let me show you it. So we're going to the admin widget, and we're going here straight to the Viewable Files section. You look like you're greeted with a blank page, if you will. But what you have to do is select some or all of your cases. It builds the grid very quickly. I'm going to drop off this one because this case I know is corrupt. But just click on that, and it populates all of the unique file types in all of your cases. And that's kind of why I selected all of my cases, because I want a full spectrum of all the different file types I'm going to encounter in my universe. And if I have 10, 15 cases in there that are fairly representative, I should have all the file types I'm going to deal with. Now, what you want to do is come through and select how you want those various file types handled. If, for example, a GIF, a JPEG, these different file types, you're probably never going to look at them, or maybe you are. But let's just say I'm never going to look at them in the viewer. I don't really need to. I've got a thumbnail. I've got a graphics section. So I will get those files in their fullest sense anyway, certainly within the graphics section. So I am selecting to not view these. Now that's an important point. Check mark means you will not be viewing these files in the native viewer. And then I would go save that. Easy peasy, and it's saved. So right now, the way to read this is the native viewer, and let me open up the viewer and show what that is. That's the ability to click load document. The native viewer is going to view everything except for these 4 file types. And in this case, those are the image file types. I'm going to attempt to make a first page image of everything. And that probably doesn't make sense, frankly. It probably is smart to pull out things like Excel documents. Let's see if I can find an Excel document right here. Probably no logic to try to render a first page image of that, because Excel just doesn't TIFF very well anyway. We all sort of know that. Encrypted Excel, we know that's going to fail. In fact, that's going to fail across the board. So we can just go check mark all of these different things. And anyway, you get the idea. You go through it file by file, and it's a pain in the butt. But everybody's environment is unique, and everybody wants to handle their files differently. So we've given you the option to key in the selection that's going to be most applicable to the way you guys work. Let's go through the different types again. Yeah, we were on first page image. Thumbnail, again, probably only relevant for graphics. PDF, there is the PDF viewer type. So this is probably only relevant to actual PDFs. Spreadsheets, there's the spreadsheet viewer. Again, probably only Excel and things like that should be selected. Media, only videos. This is really the video section. So you come through and you remove everything except for things like MP4 video. And by the way, you can always click on this button, the top of any of these columns, and it will automatically select everything. That way you don't have to deal with this dynamic of single clicking every single one. If for something like media and graphics for that matter, that's what this column is, this is graphics, it's easier probably to do the inverse, meaning select everything and then come through and remove the things for which you want to be able to utilize the viewer. So now I'm able to use the media viewer for only the window enhanced meta file. And I can go through and find other things, but you get the idea again. So we've got the graphics tab. We have the text tab, the database tab, HTML. So let me do like this. So you see that says database. This says HTML. And this one says hex. Now the hex viewer actually isn't yet in the viewers. We will be putting that in shortly within the next few weeks. So it's already here. But anyway, the rest are already in the tool. So let me go and show you in the viewer. So you've got the PDF one, which we talked about. You've got the graphics, spreadsheet, media, text, which is just the raw text from a document, a database, only really relevant if you're actually looking at a database. HTML is obviously HTML, native HTML, but also there are quite a few files where we attempt to render the file in an HTML format to make it nice and pretty to look at. A good example of that would be, in fact, a database. We render a few of the tables in HTML so it looks like a grid layout and you can make sense of it. Of course, we've added the database tab itself, and so that's sort of redundant, but there are a lot of other places where we do, in fact, render HTML, so that's what that's for. These other tabs are for other things specific to the viewer and not relevant for this video. There are two other things that are really worth understanding: size limit and the caching options. Oh, actually, before I go on, let me explain these two columns. These are just the file type, obviously, and this is the count, the number of files in all of the cases you selected that are of this type. Each of these, you can pull down this nice little tab and you can filter on them. So if you want to find Excel documents, so you can quickly fill out the spreadsheet section, you can just do something like that. So let's talk about file size. File size is exactly what you think it is. It sets a limit to the size of the file we will attempt to show you. This is 30 meg I've set it at. That's probably a little high, frankly. But there are a number of reasons why you should think hard about what you're going to set this number to, and frankly, set it as low as you possibly can for work in your environment. The reasons to keep this number low are the viewer will always try to render stuff that you haven't told it not to render. It can take quite a lot more memory than the size of the actual file to convert the file to a viewable format. So if you have 30 meg here and it tries to open a 30 meg file, that can consume maybe 100 meg in the server's RAM for some period of time. It won't be a long period, but if you have a lot of people slamming the system, that can add up quickly. If you don't set this number at all, you're going to run into another problem. If you leave this blank, for example, then there's no limit, and you're going to run into the sort of death by zip or death by compound file. It will hit on the parent file of a PST, for example, and those files are going to be a gig plus easy, and it will try to convert it. That doesn't make sense for a number of reasons. One is, it's a PST. You want to convert the individual emails, not the container file. Number two is, in the process of converting it, it's going to make a copy. And you're going to find you very quickly run out of memory on the server. And that's a disaster. So you don't want to do that. Set this to a reasonable limit. And it doesn't make sense, frankly, to be viewing files over 30 meg, which is what I had it set to. But I think you could go quite a bit lower than that. But it's specific to your environment. So the last thing to understand is the caching. So the caching shows up here. Let me open a case and I will show you caching. So first note that I have it set to 1 file backwards and 10 files forward. So let's see what happens. Excuse me, there we go. When we click, we're going to load our case, and immediately you see it loads a bunch of images into the cache. So let's count these up. You've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Exactly what we would have expected. 1 back, 10 forward, so 11. Now, you can quickly look down here and you can see that for whatever reason, and in the case of this case, these are all folders, it couldn't render these. These first bunch, these are little no image graphics. You can see something's been rendered there, something's been rendered there. So we can go ahead and click on those and we'll get something. But we immediately know that these are garbage. So we can avoid clicking on them altogether if we want to. Of course, we could scroll through them just the same, no big deal. If we want to go ahead and change that, we could just say 15 forward or 100 forward. But we want to be careful here because we don't want to go make the numbers too large, or else it's going to spend a lot of time generating first page images that we might never have any interest in using. So that is what the cache is, and that's how you set it. You can, for what it's worth, always delete what's in the cache by just clicking there. But that's all covered in the viewer video anyway. So that is the viewable files video. Spend some time on this widget, really understand it, understand each one of these columns, understand how it affects the viewer, play with it. Go through and remove everything and then click on an encrypted Excel spreadsheet and see what happens, see how the viewer responds. Play with the size limits. Do all these kind of things in order to get a good sense of what works in your environment. Because I promise you, if you have a lot of users, this is going to be a huge headache saver for you. If you configure this correctly, the system will perform much faster, will use much less RAM, will use much less hard drive space, and your users will be much happier. It's just much better to immediately get this message, hey, your file is too big, than to spend time watching a spinning wheel. And so, you set the file logically, set the size limit intelligently, so that when you know it's really not going to work anyway, you get them the message really quickly that this file is not going to load. Anyway, that's it. Hopefully that is helpful.